All my life, I'd squirreled away every penny, stretched every meal, all for my son. But a seemingly innocent question about my social security from him, quickly followed by chilling whispers about my over 200 grand, revealed a horrifying truth. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was merely a balance sheet to be managed. What they didn't know was that my balance sheet was about to fund a very different future than they'd planned. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. I left my son's house on a winter morning, just as the holiday cheer was meant to begin. No goodbyes, no one seeing me off. They didn't explicitly ask me to leave, but they never asked me to stay either. All my life, I'd squirreled away every penny, stretched every meal, all for my child. I once foolishly believed that sacrifice alone was enough to etch a permanent place in their hearts. But then, a seemingly innocent question made a chilling truth undeniable. To them, I wasn't a mother. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old, and I live alone in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Bozeman, Montana. It's humble, just a single story with faded white siding and a porch that still groans beneath my weight. But it is mine. The quiet here is a constant companion, especially since Arthur passed away 5 years ago. Sometimes, I still catch myself talking to him while watering the tomatoes he planted or the stubborn lavender that refuses to bloom. Silly, maybe, but it helps. My days unfold in a predictable rhythm. I wake before the sun, tend to my garden, then brew coffee and sip it on the front steps, reading the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. Orion, my old tomcat, usually curls up beside me, purring like a worn-out engine. He found me after Arthur's funeral, and we just stuck to each other. People ask if I get lonely. I tell them no, I prefer selective solitude. I like the stillness, the absence of demands. But I'd be lying if I said I never missed the comforting chaos of a full house. Marcus is my only child. He lives in Spokane now, a 6-hour drive west. He's married to Chloe. They have 2 bright, boisterous children, Lily and Sam. Good kids. They send photos and glitter-covered Christmas cards. Marcus works as a warehouse manager, a stable job, and I'm proud of him. But he doesn't visit much. I can't remember his last real hug. He texts more than he calls. "Hey, Mum, you doing okay?" I always reply, "Yes, sweetheart, doing fine." And I am mostly. But love read off a screen feels hollow. He doesn't know how well I'm doing financially. I never told him. After 30 years as a bookkeeper, I retired with a decent pension. That, plus years of savings, built a nest egg of $205,000. Not a fortune, but more than enough for a woman who shops with coupons. I told Marcus I only get $1,000 from Social Security, an edited truth. It started when he casually asked, "You getting by okay, Mom?" I said, "Just enough to scrape by." He joked about me selling the house and moving in someday. That was the first red flag. George, my neighbor, warned me. If your kids think you've got money, they'll either ask for it or start planning their lives around it. I laughed it off, but his words stuck. I trust Marcus. I love him, but love doesn't always come with clarity. I'd seen friends give away savings, only to end up dependent. I didn't want our love tested by a money request I was too proud to deny. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm being unfair. Maybe I should trust him more. But then I remember others. Marlene, whose son squandered 20 grand. Helen, who became an unpaid babysitter until she broke a hip. So I've kept things close, planned. My name remains on every account. I pay my bills, never borrow, never ask. There's a quiet sovereignty in that, more precious than any birthday call. I still cook like someone's coming over, old habits. Beef stew, biscuits, just like Arthur loved. I set out 2 bowls, more from instinct than hope. Orion meows as if he agrees. Arthur's old cardigan, moth-eaten but comforting, still drapes over me on cold nights. I sit by the window, chamomile in hand, remembering years of steady, weathered love. There's more comfort in that memory than any bank account. I still believe in family, in unseen threads, but sometimes belief alone isn't enough, and I had no idea that a single question, just weeks later, would unravel everything I thought I understood about love, money, and being a mother. It was a sweltering July afternoon. I was weeding my green beans when I heard the familiar crunch of tires. A silver SUV eased into the driveway. Before it stopped, two small figures tumbled out. Lily, 8, and Sam, 6. "Grandma! Grandma!" they shouted. I dropped my gloves and caught them in a bundle of sticky sweetness. My heart fluttered like an old bird remembering how to fly. Hearing Grandma made the heat, the aching knees, the past month's silence, all of it, melt into something soft. Marcus and Chloe emerged. He held a diaper bag, a relic from years past. Chloe's lips curved into what might have been a smile, but her eyes darted across my yard, assessing. "House looks the same," Marcus commented, his tone neutral. I didn't care. My son, my grandbabies under my roof, even just for lunch. I'd have swept a path with my hands to keep them here longer. In the kitchen, I moved like years hadn't passed. The stove groaned, the fan wheezed. I made beef stew, cold chicken salad, Lily's favourite peach cobbler. The oven turned the kitchen into a sauna, sweat soaking my blouse. But I didn't mind. "Let them feel at home," I whispered, ladling stew into the blue bowls saved for special company. We sat around Arthur's old oak table. The breeze fluttered the napkins. I watched Sam mash potatoes, Lily recite horse names. I refilled iced tea glasses, letting their chatter blur the years. Then, as I sliced a second piece of cobbler, Marcus set down his fork. "So, Mum, how much do you get from Social Security these days?" His voice was casual, light, like asking about the weather. But I froze. It wasn't the question itself. It was the way he asked it, not with curiosity but calculation. I felt a quiet snap in my chest. I smiled. A reflex. "Oh, not much," I said. "A little over 1,000. Just enough for groceries and lights." Marcus nodded, eyes lowered. Chloe said nothing, but I caught her glance at him, quick, sharp, then gone. In that tiny gesture, something crystallized. The unease I'd suppressed, Chloe's assessing eyes, Marcus's quietness. It was all real, sitting thick between us and the peach cobbler. I changed the subject, talking about tomatoes and squirrels. Marcus gave short, empty answers. Chloe chimed in, polite, measured. The kids were blissfully unaware. But for me, the warm light I'd imagined burning between us began to dim. I had convinced myself my love, my silence, my modesty would translate into respect. Yet, here I was, being studied like a piece of land, only worth the effort if it yielded something. I looked at Marcus, not the man, but the boy who'd cried after nightmares. That child was still there, but so was this new version. Harder, vaguely uncomfortable in my kitchen. Had I become irrelevant? Or worse, a resource? I kept smiling, kept pouring lemonade. But inside, a quiet thread of doubt unraveled. Maybe George was right. That simple question, so casually asked, had opened a door I wasn't sure how to close again. Have you ever felt the cold breath of calculation from someone you loved, turning your warmth into a burden? That casual question, "How much do you get from Social Security these days?" echoed in my kitchen long after their silver SUV vanished down the driveway. The sound of Lily and Sam's laughter, once a warm memory, now felt distant, almost mocking. The kitchen, still thick with the aroma of peach cobbler and beef stew, suddenly felt too large, too quiet. I cleared the table, the clinking of dishes amplified, each sound a tiny pinprick against the fragile piece I'd meticulously built since Arthur left. Chloe's assessing glance, Marcus's averted eyes, they were more potent than any shouted accusation. It wasn't just a visit that day. It was an audit, and I was found wanting. Weeks blurred into November. The winter came down hard and early, frosting the windows and chilling the floorboards. I slipped twice that week on the ice. Nothing serious, just bruises. But it wasn't the physical ache that bothered me. It was the chilling thought that perhaps my footsteps inside the house would always be solitary now. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Not for the food, but for the sounds. Marcus asking where I kept the cinnamon, Lily's shrieking laugh, Arthur humming country tunes. For 4 years, it was the one day guaranteed to bring everyone here. This year, the anticipation felt like a fragile thing. I woke at 5 a.m., pulling the butterball from the freezer, peeling squash, starting the cornbread stuffing from Arthur's faded recipe. By mid-morning, the house filled with familiar smells of rosemary, butter, cinnamon. The table was half set, kids' cartoon turkey plates waiting. I'd even drawn a smiley face on Sam's napkin. Every 15 minutes, my gaze flicked to my phone. Nothing. They're probably stuck in traffic, I told myself, basting the turkey, peeking out the window. Any minute now, that SUV will pull up, and everything will fall back into place. But the clock crept past noon. Then 1, then 2. I tried calling. No answer. I left a message. "Hi, honey. Just wondering if you're still coming. Everything's ready. No rush. Just let me know, okay?" Another hour. A text. "If you're too busy to come, at least call. I just want to hear your voice today." Still nothing. At 4:30, I walked out to dump the trash and caught a glimpse of George's house. His driveway packed, kitchen window glowing. His daughter stirring, boys chasing, someone carving a turkey. A longing I hadn't prepared for tightened my chest. Not jealousy, just a deep ache for the noise spilling from their walls. Back inside, I lit the candles, poured red wine for myself, and set another glass across from me, by Arthur's empty chair. I smoothed the tablecloth. I told myself it was fine, that I understood. People get busy. But underneath that calm, my heart curled like a dry leaf. The food cooled. The mashed potatoes lost their steam. I picked at a slice of turkey, stared at the stuffing, then stopped. My fork hovered. I saw Marcus years ago, sitting in that very spot, teasing Arthur about how fast he ate. No laughter tonight. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch. The wine tasted too bitter. The chair across from me remained empty. I lit the candle near Arthur's photo. No lights, no TV, just me and the soft flicker. "Arthur?" I whispered. "No one came this year. I guess they're busy. Maybe next time." The candle burned lower. I stayed in that chair longer than I should have, long after the heat had left my bones. For the first time in a long while, the stillness didn't feel peaceful. It felt like an echo chamber, every forgotten moment bouncing back louder than before. 2 more days passed. No message, no missed calls, not even a forwarded meme from Chloe. Saturday morning, I made coffee, took it to the porch swing, watching the last leaves fall. The quiet felt different now, not chosen, not sacred, just empty. I didn't feel angry, not quite. More like set aside, like an old coat hung at the back of a closet you don't throw out. But you don't reach for it either. Could their silence truly mean something more? Or was I just finding shadows in the quiet? 2 weeks had passed since that quiet Thanksgiving, and the house still felt colder than usual. A chill that had nothing to do with the outside air. I could have lit the fireplace, played the radio louder, but what I truly longed for was the chaos of family. The sound of children's feet running across the floor, even Chloe's forced politeness. So one morning, just as the sky began to turn from black to grey, I packed my suitcase. I didn't tell Marcus I was coming. I was afraid he'd say no, or worse, hesitate. There's something about hesitation from your own child that cuts deeper than outright refusal. So I decided to surprise them. Perhaps unwise for a woman my age, but sometimes, when your heart aches, you do things just to prove to yourself that you still matter. I filled a small basket with gifts, 2 jars of homemade strawberry jam, still warm from the last batch, a tin of butter cookies shaped like trees, and a few simple toys I thought Lily and Sam would like. I tucked them all in with extra care, imagining the looks on their faces. I didn't fly. I've always hated planes. Too loud, too fast, too shiny. I don't trust places where everyone smiles too big and your knees touch strangers. So I took the bus. 8 hours through snow-laced roads and rest stops with bitter coffee and drafty bathrooms. I sat beside a young woman headed to Denver for work. Her name was Naomi. She was polite, asked me about my knitting, and told me her mother had passed years ago. Her dad drank too much. I didn't say much in return, just smiled and listened, but I felt oddly comforted by her presence. We were 2 women, each trying to get somewhere better, even if for very different reasons. By the time we pulled into the city, my back was screaming, every joint stiff from hours on the vinyl seat. But when I saw Lily and Sam running down the walkway toward the bus terminal, their arms stretched out, yelling, "Grandma!" It was all worth it. I dropped my bag, knelt on the concrete, and held them both like I hadn't breathed properly in months. Chloe came out next. She looked surprised, almost caught off guard. "Oh, you didn't say you were coming," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I smiled, brushing it off. I sent a message. "Maybe you were busy and missed it." She gave a tight nod. "Oh, come in. It's cold." Their house was small, in a quiet neighborhood with evenly spaced trees and too many recycling bins. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender cleaning spray and something synthetic, like plastic and soy wax. I handed out the gifts. The kids squealed over the cookies. Lily hugged the puzzle book like it was treasure. I told myself that was enough. Their joy would be mine, too. Chloe led me to a small room next to the laundry closet. The air was damp, and the heater didn't quite reach the corners, but there was a bed and a window. I told her it was perfect. "I like a bit of chill," I said with a grin. "Good for the bones." That night, Marcus didn't come home until after dark. Chloe had called ahead, saying he was running late. When he finally walked in, he barely looked in my direction. "Hey, Mom," he mumbled, already kicking off his shoes and heading toward the stairs. I stood there in the kitchen, dish towel in hand, frozen. I hadn't seen him in months, and all I got was a nod. I reminded myself he must be tired, work is hard, life is busy. But somewhere deep in my chest, something pulled tight, the same way it did years ago, the night of his college graduation. He had told me not to come, said it would be crowded, hard to find parking. "And honestly, Mom, you won't know anyone there." But I went anyway. I sat in the back, clutching my purse, watching him walk across that stage with tears streaming down my face. I never told him I came. I didn't want to embarrass him, but I had never been prouder. The next few days, I kept myself busy. I cooked meals I thought he'd like. Meatloaf, just like when he was little. Creamy potato soup, roasted carrots with garlic and thyme. I folded laundry, swept the back porch, helped Lily with her homework. The house never felt like mine, but I tried to be useful. Still, every evening, Chloe brought home takeout. Marcus would eat silently at the counter, scrolling through his phone. I tried to ask about his work, about how they were managing, but the answers were short, polite, empty. It wasn't that they were unkind. It was something worse. I was invisible. One evening, I made black bean stew with smoked ham, Marcus's favorite when he was 7. I spent hours simmering it just right, even sprinkled a little fresh cilantro on top, the way Arthur used to. I set the table with cloth napkins, lit a candle, tried to create something warm. Marcus walked in, pulled out a salad from the fridge. Chloe followed with 2 sparkling waters and said, not unkindly, but not warmly either, "It smells great, Mum, but we're eating lighter these days. You know, cleaner stuff." I nodded, smiling. "Of course, I understand." I gathered my bowl, brought it to the sink, and stood there washing the dishes while they ate their kale and tofu in the other room. I didn't cry, not out loud, but inside, something small folded in on itself. It wasn't about the food. It was about what it meant to try and feed someone from your heart, only to realize they've lost the taste for what you have to give. The days blended into one another, like the slow drip of a faucet you've learned to ignore. I tried to stay useful, telling myself Marcus must notice the little things, the breakfast, the laundry, the way I folded the kids' socks into neat pairs like I used to when he was little. Maybe he just wasn't saying anything yet. Maybe he'd hug me before I left. Each morning, I rose before everyone else. It's a habit that never left me, even after retirement. I'd brew a fresh pot of coffee, slice the sourdough I brought from home, toast it, and lay out a few homemade jams. Apricot, strawberry. The kind Chloe once said reminded her of her grandmother, but the kitchen remained quiet. Marcus passed through with a travel mug, muttering, "We're used to Starbucks now, Mum." Chloe would glance up from her phone, offer a polite thanks, and rush to the garage without a bite. By 9 a.m., the house emptied. I tiptoed around like I was walking through someone else's home, not wanting to disturb a single thing. I turned the television on low, barely a whisper, just so I could hear a voice other than my own thoughts. Most days, I rewatched old reruns of cooking shows or weather reports, not because I cared about the forecast in Minnesota, but because the voices were friendly. I wiped down countertops that were already clean. I swept the floor twice. I folded throw blankets that hadn't moved. It was strange being in a house filled with people, yet feeling lonelier than I did back in my cabin in Bozeman. At least there, I had the wind, the birds in my garden to talk to. Nights were harder. The small guest room off the laundry area was colder than I let on. The hum of the dryer next door sometimes startled me awake. I'd lie in the dark and listen to the distant sounds of traffic from the freeway, a low, constant roar. Nothing like the still nights back home, where only the hoot of an owl or the shuffle of raccoons might stir you. I missed the sound of chickens clucking in the morning. I missed the creak of my back porch steps and the way Arthur used to tap his knuckles against the cabinet door when he got up in the night for a glass of water. I even missed the way the floorboards groaned under my slippers. City living had its conveniences, sure, but for someone like me who didn't belong to any routine here, it was a kind of exile. I was surrounded by speed and purpose, but I moved too slowly for either. And then came the moment I had known, in some quiet place inside me, was bound to happen. One evening, after dinner, takeout again, this time Thai food, Chloe set her glass down and said, with a gentle smile, "So this Saturday, we've got plans with some friends from work. Kind of a weekend retreat up north, just a couple's thing." She didn't look at me directly. Marcus was busy peeling the label off his beer bottle. I nodded slowly. She added, "I bet you're starting to miss Bozeman, huh? Your plants? Your little porch?" My lips formed a smile before my heart could catch up. Yes, the orchids must be thirsty by now. And that was that. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation. But her words drew a clean line in the sand, as soft as sugar dust on a countertop. I was no longer part of the rhythm here. My visit had become a pause in their lives, one that now needed to end. That night, I packed my things quietly. I didn't cry. There's a dignity in knowing when to leave. I folded the kids' drawings and tucked them into my purse, smoothed the sheets on the narrow bed, and left the jar of jam on the kitchen counter with a note for Lily and Sam. With all my love. Sometimes the most heartbreaking moments are not loud. They come dressed in polite sentences, spoken over dishes and half smiles. They don't shove you out the door. They just show you where it is, and trust that you'll know how to walk through it. Have you ever recognized the unspoken sign that it's time to leave, even when no one says the words out loud? It was past midnight. The house lay dark, cloaked in the quiet before Christmas. I told myself I'd leave quietly at dawn. No drama. That's my way. But a mother's aching instinct pulled me toward Marcus's door, slightly ajar. Voices, low and cold, drifted out. I froze. Chloe's voice sliced through the silence, accusing me of lying about my finances, of sitting on over 200 grand. My savings, she scoffed, should be helping them, not gathering dust. Marcus, quieter, sounded resigned. Chloe pressed, saying if I truly cared, I'd help with their mortgage, daycare, not bring jam. Their plan? Next time, they'd say they were taking a trip. We really need the space. Chloe finished. No shout, no tears. Just a quiet, profound unraveling. I turned, each step heavy, back to my tiny room. The heater hummed, but the cold had reached my bones. I sat there sleepless until dawn. Not anger, just a hollow where love used to be. I zipped my bag, scribbled a note. Heading back to Bozeman. Thanks. Kids lovely. Love them. No punctuation, no bitterness. I didn't knock. I didn't want to see their eyes. The bus station wasn't far, the seat cold. My reflection, drawn, grey, unfamiliar. Indifference, I realized on the highway, is a kind of abandonment no one warns you about. Have you ever felt that quiet dismissal, where love turns to an unwanted burden? The bus pulled into Bozeman just as the sun broke over the mountains, casting long blue shadows across the snowbanks. I stepped down onto the sidewalk, gripping my worn canvas bag tighter than I meant to. My fingers ached from the cold, but I welcomed it. It reminded me I was still here, still capable of feeling. The walk to the house felt unfamiliar, like returning to a place I used to dream about rather than a home I truly lived in. When I unlocked the door, a warm, faintly sweet smell drifted out. Wood dust, the citrus oil I used on the floorboards. It greeted me like an old friend. The radiator clicked to life, humming steadily. Arthur's picture, taken during our 25th anniversary trip to Glacier National Park, still sat on the shelf near the TV. I set my bag down but didn't unpack. Everything could wait. I stood in the center of the room, letting the quiet wrap around me. The orchid by the window had bloomed, soft purple petals stretching delicately toward the light. I hadn't expected that. Not joy, not yet, but something close to recognition. This house may not have spoken back, but it never asked me to prove I belonged. Without taking off my coat, I walked straight to the old wooden cabinet in my bedroom. I pulled open the drawer and reached for the slim blue folder tucked beneath layers of old tax records. Inside were the bank documents I'd kept for years, retirement accounts, savings bonds, small inheritances, the final check from the plastics plant. I had watched these numbers grow over decades, not fast, but steadily, quietly, safely. I used to tell myself I saved for emergencies, for health scares, for Marcus's needs, if they ever became too great to ignore. I used to picture myself writing a check with trembling hands to help him through something truly dire. I wanted to be the kind of mother who could save the day without making a fuss. But today, as I stared at the statements, I saw something else. I saw a woman who'd waited too long to realize that generosity is not owed, that love, real love, cannot be brought into existence with quiet sacrifices and jam jars. I sat down in Arthur's old armchair. It creaked under me. My fingers traced the edge of the folder absently. I thought of Chloe's voice, so calm, so rational, speaking of me as if I were some hoarder, some miser guarding treasure for no good reason. I thought of Marcus's silence, his indifference, and then I thought of every dinner I'd made that week, every dish gone untouched, every word I swallowed, every smile I faked. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the heat from the radiator slowly thaw something inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a detachment, like a cord that had been tugging at my heart, finally snapped loose. Later that afternoon, I walked across the snowy lawn to George's house. He was sitting on his porch, bundled in 2 coats, smoking something that smelled faintly illegal. I sat beside him without a word. He handed me a thermos cap full of coffee. Neither of us spoke for a good 10 minutes. We just watched the light shift on the snow. Eventually, I said, "You were right, you know. George raised an eyebrow but didn't look at me. Takes a while to see clearly when your eyes are full of love. I thought I was protecting them, I said. He chuckled. Protecting who from what? I didn't answer. I just looked at the sky. The clouds were low and heavy, pregnant with more snow. You're still here, he finally said. That's something. That night, after feeding Orion and turning off all the lights except the one over the kitchen sink, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out a leather-bound notebook I hadn't touched since Arthur passed. The first few pages were full of his handwriting. I flipped past them carefully, then found the first clean page. With a pen that took 3 clicks to start flowing, I wrote, "From now on, live for myself, health first, money second, the rest for people who've never made me feel small." My hand shook slightly, but I didn't stop. I underlined the last line. Then I closed the book and placed it next to the radio, where Arthur used to keep it. I figured he wouldn't mind me borrowing the spot. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no cinematic swell of music in the background, no dramatic tear falling onto the page. Just a breath, a long, quiet, complete breath. I hadn't realized how shallowly I'd been breathing these last few weeks. Have you ever found the quiet strength to redefine your purpose, not out of anger, but out of a profound shift in understanding? Chapter 6. The Quiet Reclamation. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, though I hadn't set one. It had only been a week, but it felt like years since I last made coffee just for myself. No extra mugs, no waiting for little feet running down the hallway. Just me, the quiet, and the smell of fresh grounds. I turned on the radio. A country song filled the kitchen, the kind Arthur used to hum along with while fixing the sink. This one was his favorite, I murmured, placing the mug down gently. This time, the smile on my face didn't carry bitterness. Just memory. Gratitude, maybe. At the end of it all, our time together still felt like something worth keeping close. I stepped out onto the porch and drew a deep breath. The morning air was cold and clean, with that sharp crispness only Montana mornings deliver. I walked around the yard, picking up fallen branches from the windstorm a few nights ago, plucking a few withered greens from the garden beds. At least the plants still need me, I said aloud, crouching down to untangle a bit of frost-bitten vine. They don't ask for anything in return. The peace I felt wasn't noisy or triumphant. It was simple, soft, the kind that sneaks up on you after you've stopped trying to earn it. A week later, I biked into town, wrapped up in my thick green coat, with a scarf pulled over my ears. I parked outside the hardware store and pushed open the door. The bell jingled above me. "Mrs. Vance?" the shop owner called out from behind the counter. "We all thought you'd moved away for good. Went off to live with your family and all." I smiled as I placed a list of roofing supplies on the counter. "I gave it a try," I said lightly. "Turns out I breathe easier here." He didn't ask for more, and I didn't offer it. Some stories are too big to explain between shelves of duct tape and gardening gloves. But behind my smile was a woman who had just survived a quiet storm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt steady on my feet. And that steadiness was just the beginning of what I was truly capable of. Have you ever felt a deep, quiet strength emerge after a storm, knowing the next chapter is truly your own? One morning, at the end of February, just as the last of winter finally loosened its grip on Bozeman, I opened the old cedar chest beneath the stairs. I hadn't touched it in years. The hinges creaked like an old friend whispering secrets as I lifted the lid. Inside, everything was just as I remembered. A handkerchief embroidered with wildflowers, a bundle of letters Arthur had written me during our early years, the family photo album already yellowing at the edges, and a thick packet held tight with a rubber band. The bank records, savings notes, and pension details totaling just over $205,000. I carried them all to the kitchen table. The morning sun filtered through the curtains and fell across the worn pages and faded photographs, casting a warm glow over decades of memories. I sat in silence, not with regret or sadness, but with a quiet sense of clarity. For the first time, I knew exactly what needed to be done. Later that afternoon, I walked 5 blocks to a small law office I'd passed 100 times, but never entered. It smelled faintly of lemon oil and paper. The receptionist smiled more warmly than anyone in Marcus's house had in months. I took a seat across from the attorney, a man younger than Marcus, but with the same cautious eyes, and began. The first page read, "I, Eleanor Margaret Vance, residing in Bozeman, Montana, declare this to be my last will and testament. I am of sound mind and body." I outlined everything plainly. A portion would be set aside to cover funeral expenses. Another would go to the town's public library, the same one where I used to volunteer on Saturday mornings, helping shy children sound out their first words. The rest would be donated to a local senior assistance program, a fund to help women like me stay independent a little longer. I hadn't done it out of anger. In truth, I felt none, only understanding. Family, I'd learned, isn't defined by blood. It's shaped by presence, by compassion, by showing up, not by what you expect in return. When it came to the section about Marcus, I read every word aloud to the lawyer, steady and slow. I leave no inheritance to my son, Marcus Hill, not because I no longer love him, but because I have come to understand that anything love must be bought for is not truly love at all. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I took off my glasses, leaned back in the chair, and closed my eyes for a moment. I wasn't angry, just tired in a way that didn't ask to be soothed. Back home, I folded the will into an envelope and tucked it in the drawer beneath the wedding photo that had hung on the wall for 40 years. Next to it, I placed a more recent picture, one of me surrounded by kids from the library, all grinning with missing teeth and crooked pigtails. It looked right, somehow, to put them side by side. One, a life I'd lived with devotion. The other, a new kind of love I'd discovered late, but earnestly. The following morning, after church, George's wife, Brenda, walked beside me down the steps. I told her gently about the will. Her eyes widened behind her thick glasses. "You're not leaving anything to your son?" she asked softly. I smiled, not bitter, just knowing. "I am," I said. "I'm leaving him freedom." The wind picked up, rustling the bare branches above us. It didn't sting anymore. On the way home, I stopped by the corner cafe and ordered a latte, something I hadn't done since last fall. I took a seat at the small table by the window, the same one Arthur and I used to sit at every first Saturday of the month. I didn't open my checkbook. I didn't check for messages. I simply sipped my coffee, feeling its bittersweet warmth settle into my chest like a memory I no longer needed to fix. Outside the window, the town carried on, slow, ordinary, unremarkable. But to me, that quiet moment felt like the first true breath I'd taken in years. Have you ever found peace in letting go of expectations, realizing your path to freedom isn't what you imagined? The orange light of sunset now washed over my kitchen walls, not with the sting of loneliness, but with the quiet comfort of a familiar canvas. My old cat, Oliver, stretched lazily beside me, his purr a soft motor running through the silence. I reached over and scratched his ears gently, my hand moving slowly, thoughtfully. "I've lived long enough to understand," I said out loud, not to anyone in particular. "No one owes you happiness except yourself." There was no sorrow in my voice, no bitterness in the way I said it, just a quiet truth I had finally come to accept. People in town began to notice a change in me. Not right away, but slowly, like how spring creeps in, even when there's still frost on the ground. I wasn't the same woman who once kept her eyes low at the grocery store, afraid to meet pity in someone else's glance. Now, I walked more, took longer routes just to breathe deeper. I nodded to folks passing by, started conversations I never would have before. I signed up for the senior meditation class at the community center, a room with creaky floors and 2 bright lights, but filled with people who, like me, were learning how to sit still and listen to their breath without letting the past swallow them whole. I wasn't good at it. My knees ached, and my thoughts wandered. But I went back every Tuesday and Friday. The library saw more of me too, not as a volunteer this time, but just as someone who needed a quiet place to read and remember who she used to be. The librarians knew me by name again. One Thursday morning, a young nurse from the county clinic stopped by to check my blood pressure. She was cheerful and talkative, probably not more than 25, with a name tag that said Kelly and a braid halfway down her back. As she wrapped the cuff around my arm, she smiled and said, "I bet your kids visit a lot, huh?" I didn't flinch. I didn't offer explanations or carefully rehearsed answers. I just smiled back, gentle and steady. "They don't," I said simply. "But that's all right. I have myself, and that's enough." She paused, looking slightly unsure of what to say, but then she nodded. I think she understood more than she let on. 3 months into the new year, the snow had mostly melted. The road to town was no longer slippery, and the branches in my backyard had begun to hint at new life. Spring was near. I could feel it in the soil, in the light, even in my joints aching a little less each morning. And then the phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice at first was softer than I remembered. "Hi, Mom," he said, with that careful, warm tone he hadn't used in years. "I've been meaning to call. Things have been complicated." I stayed silent, letting him gather himself. After a pause, he continued, "The truth is, I've run into a little trouble with the project. It's a startup thing. We just need a bit more runway, just enough to get through the next quarter." Then came the words I knew were coming. "I was wondering if you might be able to help. Just a loan, a small one, until we raise the next round." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My fingers curled slightly around the armrest of Arthur's chair. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I said, calm and steady. "I've donated all of it. The savings. I gave it to the community center. To the kids. It's gone." For a moment, I thought the line went dead. But then his voice came back, sharp and loud. "What? Are you serious right now? That was our family money. You gave it away to strangers?" I sat a little straighter, but my voice stayed low. "That money was meant for you once, Marcus, but not anymore. You and your wife made it very clear what you valued. You never asked me if I was eating well when I stayed with you. Never checked if the blanket on that cold floor was warm enough. You didn't even touch the food I cooked with love." He tried to interrupt, but I kept going. "You think you're entitled to everything I've saved, that I owe it to you just because I gave birth to you? You should ask yourself, Marcus, if your own children treated you the way you've treated me, how would you feel?" There was silence on the other end. A long, hollow pause. Then he hung up. I sat back and stared at the screen for a moment. The word "disconnected" staring back at me. There was no rage in me. No tears this time. Just stillness, like the quiet after a long storm. Later that night, I opened my old messages. Dozens of them. Once the lifeline of my lonely evenings glowed on the screen. "Sorry, Mom. I'll call next week. Can't talk now. Busy with the kids. Miss you. Promise will come by soon." I read them all, one by one, as if saying goodbye. Then, one by one, I deleted each thread. I no longer needed these ghosts of affection that never arrived. The following week, I began volunteering at the community center, helping out with the children's reading program. I swept floors, wiped tiny noses, read storybooks out loud with silly voices. The center's coordinator, a kind woman named Marcia, looked at me with wide eyes one afternoon. "You're on your feet for hours. How do you have this much energy?" I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. "As long as I've got breath in me," I said. "I want to use it to love someone who doesn't hurt me for it." She nodded, but didn't reply. Her eyes did, though. It was the first time in decades I had felt full, not of food or pride or approval, but of meaning. One cold morning in April, I brought out the wooden box from under the bed, the one I hadn't touched in years. I placed it on the kitchen table and opened it gently. Inside were the last remnants of a life long lived, an old photograph of Arthur, a pressed daisy from our anniversary, my first pair of eyeglasses, a few cards from Marcus when he was little. I lit a candle beside it, the flame flickering soft gold across the wood grain. "Arthur," I whispered, "I think I've done all right. I'm not angry anymore, just tired of waiting for people who won't come." I picked up my journal, the one I had started after that night on the bus, flipping past pages of grief and clarity. I wrote one more entry, my hand trembling slightly. "If you don't know how to love yourself first, no one else's love will ever feel real. Today, I choose me." I closed the book, set it back in the drawer, and went to brew tea. Outside, the sun was rising behind the bare trees, casting long shadows across the porch. I stepped out, wrapped in my thick cardigan, holding a warm mug between my hands. Oliver, the scrappy stray cat I'd taken in, jumped onto the bench and curled up beside me. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the world waking up. And then I saw them, a car pulling into the gravel driveway. Marcus stepped out first, his hair slightly longer, his face drawn but gentler than I remembered. Behind him, my two grandchildren scrambled out with red cheeks and wool hats. They waved. I didn't move. I didn't smile yet. I waited. Marcus approached slowly, eyes on mine, not filled with entitlement or guilt, but something else, something quieter, maybe regret, maybe understanding. "Hi, Mum," he said, voice low. I nodded, still holding my tea. I could feel Oliver stir beside me, but I stayed still. We were no longer mother and son clinging to old roles. We were just two people learning what love means again, or maybe for the first time. Have you ever found that the greatest act of love is sometimes letting go, allowing both yourself and others the freedom to truly understand what matters? If this story resonated with you, if you've walked a similar path, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice is important to us. And for more stories of quiet strength and unexpected transformations, don't forget to subscribe to Forgotten Mothers. We're always here to remember the ones the world too often